From advertising to software as a service to data.
Across all of our programs and clients, we've seen a 55 to 65% open rate.
Getting brands authentically integrated into content performs better than TV advertising.
Typical lifespan of an article is about 24 to 36 hours.
If we're reaching out to the right person with the right message and a clear call to action, then it's just a matter of timing.
Welcome to the MarTech Podcast, and I Hear Everything production. In this podcast, you'll hear the stories of world-class marketers that use technology to drive business results and achieve career success. We'll unearth the real-world experiences of some of the brightest minds in the marketing and technology space so you can learn the tools, tips, and tricks they've learned along the way. Now here's the host of the MarTech Podcast, Benjamin Shapiro.
Welcome to the MarTech Podcast. I'm your host, Benjamin Shapiro, and today we're going to explore the power of unlocking anonymous visitor identification. Joining us is Nick Lissette, who is the CEO of the Black Pearl Group, which is your go-to solution for identifying and engaging with your website visitors. Black Pearl Group has recently launched a product called Pearl Diver, which is a feature-rich platform that helps you transform anonymous traffic into quality leads to boost conversions and revitalize your email marketing strategies. And in addition to providing us with our guest today, the Black Pearl Group is also a sponsor of the MarTech Podcast. And today, Nick and I are going to discuss how you can unlock anonymous visitor identification. All right, here's the first part of my conversation with Nick Lissette, the CEO of the Black Pearl Group. Nick, welcome to the MarTech Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Benjamin. I'm stoked to be here and in advance apologize for my horrendous accent.
I happen to like your accent, and I'm also very grateful to you and the Black Pearl Group for being a sponsor of the MarTech Podcast. So let me just start off by saying thank you for helping us produce our content, and I'm really excited to hear about a couple of things about the Black Pearl Group. Let's start off. Tell us what the Black Pearl Group is, because there's the group and then there's the products that you're launching. What does the Black Pearl Group do?
Well, we're a public company, so we consider ourselves a data technology company. And what we do is we build and occasionally buy data-centric cloud sales and marketing services, and they're specifically built for small to medium-sized businesses. So Pearl Diver is an example of one of those services or products that the group owns.
So I know, was it New Old World Stamp, which is a solution that's your email signature solution, Pearl Diver, which we're going to talk about today. What are some of the other products that are in your portfolio?
We've got Black Pearl Mail, which is like a demand generation tool for your daily business email. It takes that vacant real estate underneath the email signature, which, of course, New Old Stamp do a brilliant job of, and transforms that into like a digital billboard for your email. And then we have Insights, which actually measures engagement with your daily email. So sort of like a extremely intelligent read receipt and beyond.
All right. So you mentioned that you have Pearl Diver, the newest product from the Black Pearl Group. And I will cut to the chase here. One of the things that I think is fascinating is that you have the ability to know the unknowable. You can unlock anonymous visitor identification. Tell us what visitor identification is. If it is anonymous, how does that all work? What's the product do?
So firstly, what is it? It's actually literally showing you the individuals that are turning up to your website. So in plain English, rather than like if you look at what you get from Google, it will say you got some visitors. If you go to get like Zoom Info, which got lots of features, one of it shows you who's on your website, but it shows you the company. Pearl Diver is the individual. So Nick Lissette, CEO, Black Pearl Group, my phone number, my email address, right? The revenue of the group. Individual level would be gender specified, income range, like really feature-rich information, which gives you the ability of controlling in a cost-effective way the outreach. In essence, transforms the amount of leads you get from your website by usually about 1,000%.
Let's talk about how that works. Somebody's coming to your website, they're on a browser, they're not necessarily divulging, they're not filling out a form and giving name, email, company size, all the rich information that you have. How is Pearl Diver able to extract that information through just the website visitor data?
So the key part is to do it in an ethical way. We talk about ethical data here at Black Pearl, and that means making sure that we're doing things in a compliant manner, compliant by GDPR, which is the European standards, there's California Data Act, there's a whole lot of different things. So the way that we go around doing it is Pearl Diver sits silently on your website, and then what happens is a visitor turns up and Pearl Diver captures the first party data which is inherently left behind in browsing your website. So that could be your mobile ID, an IP address, and yet we'll utilize some cookie information as well, although that's not a deal breaker for us. So now we've got a couple little different first-party identifiers. We triangulate that information. And what I mean by that is an IP address is useful because you're coming from there, but a mobile ID gives you a slightly better match, and then the cookie. And then we take that information or that profile and we match it against an identity network. So essentially, who does this information belong to? We serve that up. So why I like that information is because it's information which all the big companies have, and they use it against everyone else in pay-to-play platform. Facebook knows who's on your website, Google, Amazon, Apple, all the big ones, they inherently know that. They don't share that information with us because they want us to use their platforms, right? It's the nature of pay-to-play platforms. We're taking that information, which in our opinion, our customers should already own and know, and unlocking it for them.
All right, so somebody's able to come to the website. There's some first-party data, mobile app ID, IP address, some other signals. That's then fed to an identity resolution company, which is able to essentially say, okay, we have an understanding of who this person might be. How accurate do you think the matching process is when you have this sense of anonymous data? You get some bits of information. How able or how sure are you that that's actually going to show up to the person that you say they are?
Firstly, when you think about the amount of traffic turning up to your website, there's a percentage of that which varies from company to company, which is just bot and essentially spam traffic. Rule of thumb, maybe 50%. So you already got that discounted away. Then you're looking at the rest of it. We like to think that I usually say a rule of 20% of what you think is turning up to your website will be able to identify to you. And the accuracy of that data, especially when it comes to what we're doing at Pearl Diver, is really good because it's getting processed on a high frequency basis. So data degradates about 15% a month. So if you're relying on things like web scraping, that information is typically pretty much out of date. So again, the identity resolution network checks on the authenticity or recency of the email address, of the mobile number, of the job title. So you're getting really fresh information. But in the world of data, there's no such thing as 100%, as we all know.
Now, you mentioned the 800-pound gorilla in the room. I'm sure that there are marketers listening to this podcast being like, wait, you could do that? Somebody comes to your website, they don't give you your email address, and you can use this tool to figure out who they are and write them. Talk to me about the sort of legal sense of how you can collect and use this data. And also talk to me about some of the ethical components of, is it right for somebody comes to your website and you can get their email? Should you be emailing them if they didn't expressly give you that contact information? Help me understand the legal and the ethical component of this.
Sure. So the first thing is the legal side of things, right? When you're setting up with Pearl Diver or anything that would be similar to Pearl Diver, you got to make sure that your website policies are up to date and you're clearly showing your cookie policies when people are turning up to your website. So Pearl Diver will give you that prompt to update that and make sure that you're compliant. So that's kind of the first big thing. The second thing is obviously, especially in America, it's opt out, not opt in with regards to email. With mobile numbers or calling people, that's a very different beast. And you got to make sure that if people are on a non-call list, that you're adhering to that. But otherwise, when you think about the ethical side of things, I would argue that using something like Pearl Diver is highly ethical for small to medium-sized businesses because it's stopping you being reliant on the pay-to-play platforms to try and turn an anonymous visitor into a lead, which is a lot of time and a lot of money that we have to put into things. So you get to see who's turning up to your website, but I think the magic question here is, Benjamin, is who should you reach out to? Because not everyone's alike. And I think that's when Pearl Diver does a really great job. And I use the example of retail shopping. So you're going into a shop to buy a new shirt. If you just walk into a shop for the first time and you just walk in the door and then the assistant comes up and says, "Oh, you should try this shirt on. I'm going to give you a deal on it. Quick, come to the changing room. Quick, hurry. It's the sale ends today," and starts thrusting clothes upon you, you will back right out the door immediately. Like, that is a really aggressive thing to do. People will not like that. Retail assistants that work best, you walk in the door, they smile, they say, "Hey, look, I can see you browsing. I'm just over here folding some clothes, but if you need different size or you're not seeing what you like, just ask me. There's plenty more out back." And you go, "Thank you." And then if you need a help, you'll reach out, or they'll come over 2 minutes later and say, "Actually, you might be interested in this based off what you're looking at." And you go, "Oh, yeah, thank you." So think about that approach, and that is how you have to use the data that you'll get from Pearl Diver, which is ranking people by engagement. So people that are turned up to your website once that are not ideal customers, don't reach out to them aggressively. They're a drip email campaign. They're an email newsletter. People that you've identified as a prime customer, so like Ideal Suit, that have visited multiple times or multiple people in the company have turned up, they're far more engaged and far more receptive to a more direct outreach. So it's about using the level of engagement and I guess your ideal customer audience in your head to dictate the outreach from there. And if you do that well, everyone's a winner.
So tell me a little bit more about the data. When you're thinking about unlocking visitor identification, I understand somebody comes to my site and great, now I can convert that IP address into name, email, phone number, company size, and I can go through the list of people. Are you able to get intelligence on company-wide data? Are you able to get intelligence on what a person's interactions are over time? Or are you responsible for taking that data from the Pearl Diver platform and then doing the analysis yourself?
That is the secret, right? That you have to measure engagement over time, and that's what Pearl Diver does. And we don't actually just do that by website data, it's also email data as well. So a little kind of side conversation, you were talking about the other products we've got, like where Black Pearl Group has like a real superpower is in email data and email deliverability. I started my first company at 24, and that was in email, cloud email. And you can see from the gray hair, I'm not 24 anymore. So
must have been like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, barely. Yeah. Time flies when you're having fun. So we know a lot about email. And so we don't actually just rely on the website traffic to tell people who the gems are, who the pearls are for reaching out to. It's also the email. Because if you see someone that you've historically emailed in the past coming up to your website, they are the easiest ones to reach out to because they're either an existing customer looking for new goods or services. There is an existing customer that might actually not be happy with the existing service, which you want to know about to stop churn. Or they could be a known entity, a prospect from the past that you didn't get over the line that's back in the market. Either of those scenarios, these are the easiest people to reach out to because you already have an existing email relationship with them, which you can just reignite and then segue straight back into talking to those people. So that is something you get with Pearl Diver as well. It's also got that email component. So again, you're not just reliant on a sort of single source to evaluate where you want to put your time and money into.
You mentioned understanding where you want to put your time and money. And honestly, most of the time as marketers, we're thinking about what's the campaign, what's the message, who's the target. We're not necessarily thinking about the triggers and the identification for how we figure out if someone is in our target market and whether we should use that data to include them in our messaging. Often the problem is identifying who's actually in your segment so you can send that brilliant messaging that you've been working on. And that's why anonymous visitor identification is such a critical and maybe underutilized portion of the modern marketing stack. And that wraps up this episode of the MarTech Podcast. Thanks for listening to my conversation with Nick Lissette, the CEO of the Black Pearl Group. Join us again tomorrow when Nick and I continue our conversation talking about how site visitor identification enhances lead gen. If you can't wait until our next episode and you'd like to learn more about Nick, you can find a link to his LinkedIn profile in our show notes, or you can visit his company's website, which is pearldiver.io. Just one more link in our show notes I'd like to tell you about. If you didn't have a chance to take notes while you were listening to this podcast, head over to martechpod.com, where we have summaries of all of our episodes and contact information for our guests. You can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter, and you can even apply to be the next guest speaker on the Martech podcast. Of course, you can always reach out on social media. Our handle is MarTechPod on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or you can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. My handle is Ben J. Shap, BenJShap. And if you haven't subscribed yet and you want a daily stream of marketing and technology knowledge in your podcast feed, we're going to publish an episode every day this year. So hit the subscribe button in your podcast app, and we'll be back in your feed tomorrow morning. All right, that's it for today. But until next time, my advice is to just focus on keeping your customers happy.